Hello and welcome to another jungle video, and in this one we are going to be having a look at the hardest jungles to master. Now obviously we frequently look at the best junglers in the meta and we do that based upon the patches, but there are a lot of junglers that are great for winning, climbing and learning. But what I mean by the hardest to master is that these champions are for people who like a challenge. They want to constantly feel like they're learning something new. They're probably never going to really unlock the full potential of their champion, and you'll only really do that when you're in the zone. And ultimately, the champion gives you this "I could have always played better" feeling, which is part of the reason why you can play so many games with them and always working on becoming better. That being said, if you want to learn how to play these champions with all the tips, itemization, and suggestions you could ever want, the Mobalytics champion page has everything you need. With daily updates, the build page has the best items, runes, and more, which you can also auto-import into your client. And for you NA players, it also works for ARAM. Should you have a nemesis in a champion, you can head to the counters tab, which gives you a full breakdown of 200 IQ strategies and the champions you can use to inflict your wrath. If you simply want to learn a champion to increase your pool, you can head to the guide page, which will give you strengths, weaknesses, power spikes, and a full game plan, in addition to a full combo page researched by only the most gifted mechanical gods. Finally, if you want to mimic the best in the world, the pro page will show you all the details from runes to abilities to items. All of this is also available on Mobalytics' companion, so head to the link in the description below to download that, which not only helps you climb more, it also supports the channel directly. Thank you very much. Now, as we start off here, I think it's pretty obvious what kind of champions you're going to see. Just remember that the skill floors will vary between the champions, and I will recommend ranks for them, but remember the skill ceiling for all of the champions is higher than Mount Targon, or Teemo after he eats his own shrooms. And on that note, Nidalee has to be first. Many junglers will tell you that Nidalee is simply the hardest to master in the game, at least in their opinion. Simply learning her first clear or making that truly optimized is one of the most difficult things you can do from a jungle clear perspective. Though watching people learn Karthus with reliable Qs kinda makes me laugh also. You have 7 abilities at level 3, 7, and you have to maximize the form switching, and most people severely overestimate her spear. This is made obvious by everyone flaming every pro player and Yankos every time one misses. That just shows how you don't understand the champion. Yes, it's really the only intuitive aspect of her kit that's easy to see, obvious to use. The problem is throwing spears at high elo players or players at the same skill level as you isn't the same as throwing them at people that are a lower rank than you. So you need to maximize your human form autos, red buff slows, well-timed heals, using smart traps, all add into how complex she is mechanically as a total system. Seeing the Nidalee video I put out a few months ago comparing the Challenger to Silver clears really accentuates this point, not only in terms of those mechanics, but also in terms of decision making around those abilities when it comes to ganks, fights, and invades. And as you would have seen in the Nidalee video on invading recently, this is her core playstyle. She wants to pressure and remove the enemy jungler from the game, denying you any chance of happiness and release, and then, still impacts lanes, farms faster, and does objectives better than you. You have to know the mark system, you have to know the traps, the reset. It actually adds so much damage when you are mechanically fluid on this champion. All of a sudden, those close fights go in your favor. All of a sudden, you can go in and out of whatever situation you need, swapping forms. And then, of course, you have to master how to close games. If you're behind or wait too long or don't play with enough pressure, you're basically a minion with a heal. It's very obvious that if you are really truly great and you've mastered Nidalee, and I mean mastered Nidalee, you will not be stuck in any rank other than high elo because of the amount of options and versatility. Even if you pop off and have an amazing game, there's almost always something you could have improved on or done better. And Lee Sin is no stranger to this sort of logic. Likewise has 6 abilities at level 3, with the 7th coming at, the usual level 6 power spike. However, due to his strength this year in particular, Season 11, as a 3-way flex pick, his mastery level gets ignored. For some reason. It's because even if you hit a few spells, it's forgiving. He just does so much damage, he has so much wave clear, sustain, and control, people can get away with what they should not be able to. He should never have a dominant win rate because then he is too meta controlling, and bad Lee Sin players are being rewarded for basic plays that don't require the technical and mechanical efficiency he usually needs in order to succeed. Yes, he's one of the most mechanical champions in the game in terms of what you can physically do with a champion. It looks beautiful, it looks like poetry in motion. You kind of do these ward hops and these combos. I was around when Insect was doing Insect, and that was considered the peak Lee Sin gameplay. And now if you can't do that, you're not really considered that great at the champion. He's actually very hard to control and pilot throughout every phase of the game, and things can easily go wrong if you're not fast enough and fluid enough with all of your spells and when to use them. And yes, mechanics here is where being fast is actually a good thing for you guys. It's hard knowing what to do and when to do it. You have so many options in each situation. Lee Sin really encapsulates the sort of context of you have to be able to decide, but then you also have to be able to do it, both of which are hard. All of this, and he's actually very punishing. He's hard to play when behind, he's hard to close games out with, none of his kit is inherently easy. And to that end, Lee Sin's ganking vs farming video I did recently shows you how, despite being a mechanical menace, you can have fundamentally different playstyles from a CS per minute low kill participation gaming moment to a 5 CS per minute perma-fighting destruction high KP gaming moment. Both can work, but both only work if you understand the game, and I hope none of you lost the game as I said that. It's why he's basically considered the poster boy for jungling, and will be forever. Through the builds, through the game metas, the jungle changes, the laner complaints, anything you come across in this game, Lee Sin won't let you get bored, and you can always maximize different aspects of his playstyle to suit the game. You are always improving, and you're always mastering him in a different way. Now, a lot of you would not expect to see Graves here. The thing is, Graves has so much control over a game simply if your pathing is great. So Graves is the champion that rewards your jungling knowledge better than almost any other jungler, similar in a way to Nidalee and how our next jungler represents this as well. Not only does Graves have a lot of variety in his early jungle routes and clears, he's also a variety invade pathing and matchup abuser. In thematic fashion, he takes what he wants. He's also a lane prior savant. I mean, if you have 3 lane priors, you can win worlds. Look at Canyon. Nothing is more impressive than a strong Graves in the meta with laner prior. Not only that, you need to understand his build variation and damage output distribution, combos and animation cancels for sustained DPS, all the way to your burst damage combos as well. You need to know what elongated fights you can take or what champions you can just blow up. And while all of that is true, a jungler like Graves that is so connected to the flow of the game with his E and a smooth way of moving around the map is always going to be one of those champions where you can feel that control. It's almost like when you are a strong Graves jungler, you can be the pulse of the game. You can remove the enemy jungler while seamlessly scaling into the mid game, into the late game, having objective control and so on. And I think that's the word, seamlessly. Graves jungle is the quest to be seamless with any state of the game while recognizing laner prio and jungler matchup. Losing game state, you can still get juiced on 7 to 8 CS a minute and end up carrying the game. If you're winning the game state, you just make the enemy jungler down 4 levels. He fulfills the quest of having a supremely high game knowledge ceiling that while he doesn't have the mechanical issue of a Nidalee or Lee Sin, knowing his damage output with all his different build variations while matching it to your Giga Brain pathing is what determines a great Graves from a cigarless Graves. And on a similar note, Kindred is another marksman jungler that is hard to master, that does have a much lower skill floor compared to your Nidalees and Lee Sin. But you do have to understand the damage spikes in all instances, and you know, these spikes are related to the countless, almost infinite build combinations that you can use, along with tracking the marks that you have in relation to that as well. And ultimately, that's why it makes loading damage weird for Kindred. You've got a lot of ADC champs everywhere where their ult comes in really nicely. Not every matchup is a breeze to get through, so your pathing has to be absolutely top notch. And while I did mention the mechanical skill floor being lower, a Kindred that has been mastered will really show you the way to hop around, to kite, to use your E at the right time. Maybe you want to steal a dragon with the same kind of mechanism, moving from one side of a wall to the other, forcing champions that, that don't have the ability to move through them to have to walk around them, which means you kill them. Imagine not having map scaling. Couldn't be my champions. And a key component with Kindred is not letting your marks ruin your jungling. Yes, I know you want the marks, but if you are compromising your jungle pathing and the game flow that you have at your hands just to chase the Krugs, and then you lose a dragon, that's not worth. So let's use that word again. Being able to jungle seamlessly while incorporating your mark secures and selection is the hardest trick for Kindred, and you can always look for ways to bring forward those crucial moments. Aggressive pathing takes many forms. Like energy, it just changes from one to another, and Kindred can do them all, but for them to succeed, you really can't afford to mess them up. It's not forgiving. They are too reliant on that hard snowball, and yes, you can accidentally scale, and then you can take over in low elo, but a great Kindred, as you see on the gameplay channel recently, doesn't let that happen. A great Kindred masterer always has control of the game and the game pacing. Now next up we have Kha'Zix. We don't need to say too much about him because it can kind of seem like he's just straightforward. You run at people, you Q them, you R if you need to go invisible, and they die. Doesn't even feel like he needs the rest of his abilities, except that's where you'd be wrong. Ducking around with stealth, jump reset, slows, and build variation that gives you a headache can all give you a lot of decisions to make in a game. For example, are you simply going for the maximum burst combo damage where you animation cancel your abilities with your W and your Q? Or are you trying to stack your slows to help set your team up with your W, your passive auto attacks? It all factors into understanding what you do and where, rather than how to actually mechanically do it. I've made a 5 tips for Kha'Zix video. I've made a lot of different Kha'Zix videos. There's a lot of Kha'Zix YouTube content. Practicing that is all well and good. And yes, he's kind of strong in the meta, and yes, he's always around in the jungle, but that's purely because of his adaptation ability. Evolve Paths, Conqueror, Dark Harvest, Electrocute, Phase Rush once upon a time, Gore Drinker, Duskblade, all of them have different synergies with the evolves that you choose as well. So yes, his mechanics are a little bit more straightforward, but doing them fluidly and in the right moment, that's crucial. You know, your auto WQ, for example, he can be really punishing if you don't play properly. He can scale, but he's not one that's straightforward, like you just scale to win and you exist like Arthas. Even if you're really fed, you have to work for it. Your team fighting has to be flawless. You have to know when to go in and when to use your patience. Obviously, going in as an assassin is no joke when it comes to death balls. Sometimes you really have to evolve the right way for those crucial fights, and sometimes you have to let teammates die. But if you do that incorrectly, you can lose. And that's honestly why Kha'Zix is one of the best assassin junglers in the game at any moment. That's where the mastery comes in, and that's why it's rewarding. And if you didn't guess, I was always going to put Rengar in this video because he's one of my favorite champions, and I just made a video about him. Now obviously the list isn't really in any sort of particular order, save for the Nidalee and Lee Sin, although in my opinion I would put Rengar up there with them, just below. He is one of those champions that can seem almost completely useless in the wrong hands. A Kha'Zix might be able to do a few things. A Lee Sin, you know, he hits a Q and he gets an execute with a slow, you die. In Nidalee, he hits a spear and all of a sudden she's in Kugel form and you die. Rengar does not seemingly have that at all. The combos are not the easiest. The bushes have so much depth in terms of mind games, seeing every little moment where you can jump, where you cannot, using wards mid-fight to actually jump from one thing to another. You can use your Q on wards as well for a faster jump activation, understanding every single bush jump angle as well. And as I said, let's not forget the combos, the E-Flash mechanic. I've done a 5 tips for Rengar as well. It really goes over the core Rengar mechanics you need to know, but the champion just has so much going on at any given moment. It's not simply a case of clearing and getting fed and killing stuff. Kha'Zix has isolation damage, Rengar doesn't. He needs to stack his Bone Tooth. He needs to get out ahead of the game. If you fall behind, it can almost make you feel like a Yuumi sometimes. Sure, you'll scale, you'll get your items, sure, eventually someone will be one-shot, but Rengar as a champion feels like he's always moving, he's always going. If you stand still, stop and stare like a house cat, you know, you're gonna become a house cat. And having this permanent hunt mode always on, and always looking for the next kill, stacking your Bone Tooth and getting in front of every jungler and the game in terms of objectives, towers, and so on, that can be exhausting for a newer player. That can be exhausting for junglers that are still thinking about jungling. Rengar rewards better than anything second nature, muscle memory. And that's why it can take almost 100 games before you even feel remotely comfortable, and even then you're just beginning your journey. We didn't even talk about matchup knowledge, and that's something that factors into it as well. There will always be junglers in your elo that are better suited to climbing out of said elo. They will do it better than Rengar and without as much practice time. And as such, he will never be overpowered. It will simply not be allowed by Riot because it will just become way too oppressive. So while he's not accessible, he is always going to be one of the hardest to master, one of the most fun when you do. Finally, I want to close out before our shoutout section at the end with Taliyah. As the good winner rate at the moment isn't too difficult mechanically, but she is the ultimate omnivore jungler. The combo is slow, requires practice and accuracy. The ultimate usage can feel useless or feel big brain depending on how you actually play it. And in some games, it's almost like you don't even need it. You do have your rock spam and your positioning on worked ground when farming, as well as in losing games, sieging game states. All of this is important to know. Kiting while accurately hitting that Q is also vital. The W really requires significant setup to maximize her kit, but it's also very hard to use against difficult matchups, and you have to pay so much attention and use so much anticipation when you are fighting 1v1. While there isn't as much of a connection to jungle knowledge as you know with your Rengar, your Graves, or Kindred, the passive rewards great pathing and game knowledge, and is one of the few junglers that when you get it, when you finally feel connected to the champion, you can feel like the perfect jungler. You can clear fast, you can fight fast, you can one-shot, you can siege, you can wave clear. You almost have everything you need to be able to carry a game. And finally, you know, people always expect to have the Shaco because he's unique, the Rek'Sai at least because of their game knowledge and pathing routines, but they do not evolve as much as others on this list. And yes, while those are hard to play, while those are more difficult to, get to grips with, once you've sort of cracked the formula, it's about perfecting it and making sure you can use it every game no matter the matchups, because if you don't get to play the game. Shaco's a little different in that aspect because you've got AP, you've got AD, and there are a lot of mind games you can play. I just feel like with the description at the beginning of the video where I defined what it means to be the hardest to master, these other champions all fit the bill a little bit better, and we're not pretending like using Q over a wall on a level 1 support is difficult. But there you have it, some of the highest skill ceiling champions in the game. If you want to learn them, please do, but remember, they work best in certain elos and they will take a lot of time. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you were able to enjoy and learn something. If you did, please consider leaving a like, comment, and subscribing. I hope your beards are feeling soft at this point in the week, and as always, I will see you all in the next tutorial.